I'd say a deadline is always helpful.
Deadlines could be helpful.
I have a love-hate relationship with deadlines.
So I tend to not need deadlines.
If you really want to annoy people, come up with really tight deadlines. And if you want to enjoy it, listen to the swooshing sound they make when they pass by.
Once again, time for YMCAC. If you haven't tried them out, YMCAC are open questions meant to trigger exciting and fun discussions within the team and to help the members of the team get to know each other better. My guests' personal experience and perspective will shape their answers, as well as their interpretation of the question itself. Playing today are Per Lundholm, Jörgen Damberg, Mattias Johansson, Ola Ellnestam, and Henrik Kniberg. Today's YMCAC from the red deck reads: when are deadlines helpful for the team, and why?
Deadlines could be helpful. They visualize built-in lead times in processes. It could be that you have compliance take some time. It could be that legal takes some time. It could be that you have synchronization points to other teams due to not being able to introduce feature toggling or whatever. And then deadlines have a place. It could also be that you're tightly bound to marketing campaigns and different compliance needs that would make deadlines beneficial. That's probably the only time.
I have a love-hate relationship with deadlines. A little more on the hate side, I think. Generally speaking, I try to use as little as possible. There needs to be a reason for the deadline. That's why I don't like them. But on the other hand, I find them very useful in some cases, especially if they are not connected with a fixed scope. I don't think of that as deadline. I think of that more as a cadence. For example, Minecraft, we ship every week, a new snapshot typically. It's like a beta version of the product, kind of. That is a deadline. Every week we ship code to production, but we don't decide in advance exactly what's going to be in each of those releases. So that's kind of good because it creates a force feedback loop, right? I'm going to get feedback. I'm going to need to get something done so I can ship it so I can get feedback. In that case, it's great. But what I don't like about deadlines is when they become arbitrary and you have fixed scope and people are breaking their backs to achieve something that didn't need to be achieved by that date. It would have been better to descope or move the data or whatever. So yeah, it's a tool. It can be misused like any tool.
They're rarely helpful because headlines irritate the hell out of me and everyone else. So people are forced to adhere to them. They become stressed. People who come up with them end up disappointed. So instead of deadlines, I suggest other criteria of interaction, sort of stricter prioritization, more frequent interaction, put someone else from a team, put someone on another team, on your team, and exchange team members, or reducing WIP. That's a great idea. If you really want to annoy people, come up with really tight deadlines. And if you want to enjoy it, listen to the swooshing sound they make when they pass by.
I'd say a deadline is always helpful. A deadline is a point of discussion with because the deadline is there for a reason. Let's say that somebody wants something delivered. If there is a deadline, that's a fact that you can talk around. So given this deadline, we can have this scope. And unless you have a deadline, you can't discuss what is a scope. So that will I say, I know that from my experience, deadlines evokes anxiety and people get depressed. I had that recently in a neighboring team that came to me for advice. They said we had got this deadline and everyone went sad and lost their motivation. But I'd say take it from there. There's a deadline that's a tool for you to have a discussion about scope. If somebody wants something, you can always say that will be will that be before or after this deadline? If it's before, then something else will go the other way. That's why time boxing also is a very helpful tool, so that you should always think about your sprint as a deadline.
Okay, I have a very complicated and long relationships with deadlines and to-do lists and goals and stuff like that. I recently I've always been like, I'm a sober to-do app alcoholic. But nowadays I actually don't produce lists of goals or to-dos or anything like that. I tend to like avoid them like the plague. I use some, but they tend to be when I'm managing commitments towards others. It's kind of like a communication tool. So like it's like with my CTO, I have this list of things that these are the things I'm working on, and these are the things like we've talked about that I'm not working on because I'm working on these and want to give them focus. So in those cases I use lists. But other than that, I tend to use done lists. I write things when I've done them, sort of like as a kind of like weird gratitude journal at work. So I'm more happy about the things that I've done and focusing on that rather than being anxietic over things I'm not doing. But deadlines in that sense, for me, a deadline is essentially a type of commitment. I had a friend of mine who I asked him how he managed his time, and he said that he does it by making commitments to people that he thinks are in general doing valuable work for the organization. So like he has, this person seems sensible. He walks to them and he says like, what do you need done? And they say, I want A done. And then he says like, I'm going to get that done. And then he has locked in a commitment. Like it's a pressure. I have very low dopamine levels as a person. Like I'm currently undergoing an ADHD investigation, and I need like an enormous amount of stimuli to actually get things done. So I tend to manage with, like I tend to only do things when I really, really, really feel strongly about it, or when there is not like an atrociously looming deadline close by. So I tend to use commitments in order to just get especially boring things, that like cleaning or like I don't know, like releasing or like I don't know, like any repetitive shit. My work right now is actually like very blessed from not having any boring things. It's just like very, very stimulating things all the time. So I tend to not need deadlines. But I don't know, for taxes or something, I don't know, man. I have a very fun job. I don't need them.
What's your personal opinion? Who do you agree with? Who do you disagree with? When are deadlines helpful for the team, if ever? Please comment below. If you want to join in and play YMCAC with me and my guests, you are most welcome. Check out this episode where I explain more and how to proceed. And as always, explore, have fun, and be safe.